So, hello everybody, and welcome to this event. I'm very happy to introduce. Oh, I'm very sorry. So, this is I think everybody's experiencing the car warranty now. So, this is a typical phone call we're all getting in the United States every single day, and that was the time. So, sorry to start in this way, but I would like to welcome chapter members, Marie Curie fellows. From everywhere, and I have been having a look at the list of participants. There are many persons I know, and I'm sure they have a lot to bring to the discussion. And first of all, what I would like to explain is that with this event on job opportunities, career development opportunities on both sides of the Atlantic, we want to set a different tone for the year 2021. And after talking to many of you, many of them persons from the chapter and many Marie Curie fellows, I know that we have all gone through very difficult moments, and we have personal losses and job challenges and socioeconomic pressures of every possible kind. But today we want to propose a way to start anew and to show you that there's more than meets the eye. And I'm sure that you know job opportunities in your sector, but we were thinking that maybe there are platforms, there are approaches that are not yet known, and they can make your space bigger. It's not about putting a mirror in your room and making this look bigger in a fake way. It's about opening up windows and doors and spaces so that you can explore all these. And we're always available as the North America chapter to talk to you, to help you look for solutions. And we also thought that it's very important to have practical links to these possibilities and also to have an insider knowledge. And that's why we thought it would be ideal to invite our partners and dear friends from EURAXESS North America. And I think they are an example of relationships which never existed before, but they're really working in a very fruitful and enthusiastic way. Actually, Jackson and Daria, the two representatives from EURAXESS North America, we never met. We became friends. We collaborate a lot together. And that shows that even through digital communication and through our little screens, we can create new things. They're an example of that. And I really encourage people to contact them for all these practical questions you might have about job searchers and career development opportunities in North America and beyond. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Jackson Howard, who's now the regional coordinator, and this is good news, of EURAXESS North America, responsible for the US and Canada, and his main role is to inform community researchers of all scientific domain and from an interdisciplinary point of view about the funding and career opportunities that the European research area offers. And this is about European national and regional funding opportunities and so on. And there's also this very important role about European scientific diasporas in North America, which can be a very enriching platform to look for opportunities. And Jackson also works in relation to all these networks in a connected way. I mean, it's not just separate national diasporas, but interconnected international diasporas, which can help. And his experience includes working for the delegation, and prior to joining EURAXESS North America, Jackson worked in the diplomatic and nonprofit sectors. I think it was in the Chilean embassy in the United States in Washington, D.C. He speaks wonderful Spanish, and I think the decoration he has behind is from El Salvador, and I'm loving it. We speak in Spanish many times, so feel free. Jackson holds a Master of Arts degree in International Relations from the American University in Washington, D.C. And if there's something I would like to say before letting you make your presentation, Jackson, he will talk about the EURAXESS North America website and platform, which is a job search platform, but so much more. And I wanted to share my experience. Before becoming a Marie Curie Global Fellow in the US, I was working as I was first in Oxford as a senior research fellow, and then I was looking for a job, and I thought, okay, which platform can I use? So I I was using the EURAXESS platform, and I found a job as an assistant professor in European politics and European culture. So I'm not saying that it's a magic website. I'm just saying that it's worth discovering, and it might work. In my case, it allowed me to have this experience, and so it's something that is functional, that is very approachable. And beyond that, I would like to stress Darius, who's also here, and Jackson's availability to talk to you, to respond to questions, and most importantly, and this is something we'll talk about a lot today, how to create opportunities for networking, for getting to know each other in these times of fragmentation and isolation, in which most of us have the same challenges and the same problems, but we suffer in silence. We never change, and we might find solutions together. So Jackson, I think you're a channel for that. Thank you so much, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Christine. I feel like I should just ask you to follow me and make introductions in general, because that's one of the most positive, upbeat introductions I've ever received. Thank you. So I think in looking at the attendee list, we have a nice healthy mix, as you said earlier, of MCAA North America chapter members and then EURAXESS North America members. So some of you will see that I'm going to give, I think, something of a standard introduction into the job portal that EURAXESS offers and just the overall services that we offer. But I'm going to try to do it a bit quickly because I've given this in the past. I'll give it in the future. And to emphasize and underscore what Christina's been mentioning, we're here to tailor our presentation, our information to your needs, whether you want to approach us as an institution, is a sort of informal association of your colleagues, depending on your industry. We're really here to support you. It's so, the ways in which promoting Europe as a research destination or promoting European research in North America, there's so many ways that can be realized and carried out that even if you think that somehow doesn't fit and line up with the information you want to receive from us, just open a dialogue. You'll get our email address at the very end, and you can also reach us through MCAA-NA afterwards. And we may appear like we have everything set in stone and our events are all planned with no ability to change early in the year, but really we're happy to adapt as needed to whatever our members need. So with that, let me give something of the standard presentation here. I'll be happy to take questions. So please do use the Q&A function if you have any feedback, any questions for me, for Christina, for our fellow panelists who will be following me. And I'll be happy to address whichever ones apply to me. Give me one moment here while I just share my screen. Okay, so I think everything looks good here. So Christina, thank you for putting this event together. I think when I've been either leading events or been a panelist on events recently, it's been a bit, I don't want to say rote, but it's a little bit mechanical in terms of, okay, information is requested, we have to give the information, we have to connect people. But I think you've really identified the fact that there is this sort of dimension of suffering in silence or feeling a bit isolated. And ironically, we're all more connected now than ever because of all these digital tools. So as you were saying, Christina, you and I have never actually met. We've known each other for about a year, but through all of these Zoom calls, through all of these sort of coordination back and forth and promotion of Marie Curie actions and the Alumni Association and EURAXESS North America, we've actually gotten to know each other quite well. And as you mentioned, we're a two-person office based in Washington, D.C. So my colleagues attending here, I'll be presenting on behalf of the office. But if there's one thing you get from my presentation, it's just that we want to work with you to, regardless of your industry or field, just to give you information about Europe as a research and living destination. So again, I will speak really quickly, and I apologize if for any first timers, this may be a bit fast. I'll be really happy to truly give a custom presentation in a bit of a longer format afterwards. So the overall project that we represent at EURAXESS North America is called EURAXESS Researchers in Motion, with this idea of researcher mobility. We're a project of the European Commission. The Commission, as many of you know, tends to operate on these for research and innovation, at least 7-year framework programs that are the funding mechanism. So on January 1st, we started Horizon Europe. I'm very happy to say that although some final details are being worked out currently, there is the agreement to have a 95.5 billion euro budget for research and innovation, and therefore even though the pandemic is still stretching on, and then with the vaccinations, there is a lot of hope in sight that things will return to normal relatively soon. I know oftentimes, organizations work on annual budgets, and a lot of things are uncertain in the short term. So with that, I just sort of want to confidently reassure people that at the very least, there is this idea that regardless of how the timing stretches out in the next 7 years, there is this commitment from the European Commission to that 95.5 billion euro budget in research and innovation. So the overall project, as I said, is EURAXESS Research is in motion. And then there's hubs around the world outside of Europe that promote this. Basically, we act as information brokers for you. And so we are one of those 8, EURAXESS North America. As I mentioned, my colleague and I are based in Washington, DC, and we cover the US and Canada. So to briefly give an overview and sort of what the overall project aims to do, we give information and support services. So in what this oftentimes looks like is information on the different existing funding opportunities. So the ones you hear most often from us are, we will gladly bang the drum and promote Marie Curie Actions and European Research Council grants, as well as the EURAXESS job portals in general, which you'll hear about in a moment from me, with the idea that this information is useful to you if you're a researcher, regardless of nationality and researcher level, wishing to pursue your research career in Europe, or even stay connected to Europe. So you may have, as I believe our fellow panelists, have done some research in Europe, but not be based there. If you want to stay connected to Europe, you can, through us, sort of use us as information brokers to get connected to the relevant diaspora groups and organizations based in Europe. And there's full buy-in from Europe. So it's the EU and 40 countries in Europe that are represented through these 8 global hubs, and then through country offices within Europe. And then all of our services are free of charge. So like I said, do send an email just to sort of explore options, see if we can co-host an event with you, put on an event for your members, for your students and researchers. We're really open to that, and we're always looking for new opportunities. So this quick overview basically mirrors the website. There's different tabs in the top of our website, which I'll be sending in a follow-up email and then a chat message once I'm done with my portion here. But basically, there's the jobs and funding portal listing jobs in the traditional sense, as well as funding opportunities for research. What I think is really useful about this is any project that receives European Commission funding, just by rules and regulations, has to appear on your EURAXESS job portal. So you don't have to, it aims to be a one-stop shop for funding opportunities. You don't have to worry that, oh, if I check the EURAXESS portal, I'm sure there's a lot of good opportunities I'm missing. So what other portals should I supplement it with? Of course, I would encourage you to look in many places, but you can very safely have EURAXESS be your main and primary portal or website for this search, knowing that you're hitting everything that's receiving commission funding. This is like the MSCI fellowships and ERC grants, among others. You also will find countries that, through their own national budgets outside of the context of the European Commission, European countries whose national budgets have funding opportunities as well, and then universities and private organizations and research organizations that choose to register and put their opportunities there because they know it is a central spot. And then if there is any final concern I can allay for you of maybe there's a few opportunities that are sort of slipping away and not on this portal, behind the scenes, the EURAXESS web portal team has relationships and has contracts with, I believe, approximately 7 private job portals that are Europe-based, that basically they plug into that and they pull those results live. So even if you supplement your search with a couple other Europe-based funding search tools and websites, you're already probably getting that through your EURAXESS website. And it is moderated in the sense that it gets approved, so you don't really, we try to do a good job of preventing spam and sort of fraudulent or scam listings. So when you look there, you'll find that it's fairly useful and well maintained and curated. And then finally, one of the, I think, big pros of this is sometimes less is more. I know, for example, at least in the US, these are quite big tools. I think they are fairly popular internationally as well. But when it comes to LinkedIn and Indeed, just off the top of my head, when you apply to jobs that are posted on those platforms, you're applying through those websites. Obviously, the employer, the person offering this position has chosen to do that. But it's sort of, you click submit, it goes into an ether. It's a standardized format that it changes on each website. So you have to retype in your resume every time. I know that can be a bit frustrating. In the case of the EURAXESS portal, at the end of the day, you're just getting the contact information for the host institution or for the company or the person offering the position. You're not applying through or to EURAXESS. We don't know, I'm not getting any of your information. My colleagues in Europe are not. It's simply the end person. And usually there's a point of contact with a phone number, email address, physical mailing address, the institution. So basically, you're connecting directly with the person offering the job or the funding, and you don't have to worry about sort of having these barriers put up that don't even let you know who they are in the end. I think that's really a strength, and it's a bit ironic because all these tools like LinkedIn and Indeed, they're putting in more time and resources and effort into making this extra layer, which in a way, I suppose, streamlines things for the reviewer. But at the end of the day, as the applicant, you're not able to get in touch as easily. In that same vein, there's the partnering tool and hosting. I think I would encourage everyone, just so I can keep this part of my presentation a bit brief, just to explore those on your own. The hosting tool is great because oftentimes when you apply for different European research funding, you will find that you need a host institution, you need sort of a letter of commitment in hand as you apply. And therefore, these institutions know that it's a bit prestigious if they can have you receiving outside funding come to them. So they will eagerly post information there and help you sort of matchmake and find them. So those are really, really powerful tools. And then when it comes to career development, the hubs outside of Europe, so EURAXESS North America and our 7 counterparts around the world, we want to supplement a lot of what Christina's saying and sort of act in tandem with the skills building that she's mentioning and offer career development. So identify areas where you think there's gaps just in terms of your overall what's available to you through groups like us and what's not available, and then fill those gaps. So I'll share a link shortly, but for example, we just announced a 5-part series that will be held every month this spring. So starting at the end of March, we'll pause for the summer and then we'll pick up again in the fall, once a month, a 5-part series in conjunction with EURAXESS Latin America and the Caribbean hub, EURAXESS LAC, on how to get published in partnership with Taylor and Francis, the large publisher. And I mean, this is just one example. We'll also put other thematic and or practical webinar series throughout the year. This is where we want the input from our members and from folks like you that are attending these events and can let us know how we can tailor this to be more relevant. And then information and assistance. So basically, if you have the idea that you would like to move to Europe, back to Europe, connect further with institutions in Europe, I've mentioned several times now the 8 EURAXESS hubs outside of the continent, but every European country has a few or several EURAXESS service centers, country offices. They will answer country-specific information. So I think this is where I'm going to start to really just go a bit more quickly through the presentation, because I think a lot of the meat and potatoes that I can get into today is going to be in the Q&A, and then focusing on the positive message of Christina and Michael in this difficult time. But basically, I would encourage you also with the pandemic and the fact that we've all transitioned to virtual events now is don't limit yourself if you're based in the US and Canada only to our events. Truly look at the online presence, the website and social media of all 8 of our EURAXESS hubs, and then also the service centers in every country in Europe, if you have a few countries in particular you're interested in, because they're also having live webinars, they're also posting recordings. So with that, you'll be able to get training, not just from us, but basically 8-fold, you'll be able to increase your exposure. So if your time's limited and you want to browse the website, but not maybe do as much of a deep dive as you could, I would say you can simply go to the homepage at EURAXESS.org or NorthAmerica.EURAXESS.org, and then say what you are and what you want. And it'll automatically point you to the relevant part of that website, like the host institution search tool, the jobs and funding portal. In recent years, again, just to move a bit quickly here, the target groups of who we support has expanded beyond researchers and then universities and research organizations. It also includes entrepreneurs and businesses. It doesn't matter which side of this you're on. If you're looking for a job in the private sector that has a connection to EURAXESS or has chosen to post its opportunities to the EURAXESS portal, the fact that we're expanding our sort of tool set to them means that you as an applicant also are benefiting from this. So I'd encourage you, regardless of what field you're in, or whether you're looking to get away from academia or stay in academia, to just hop on the portal and then also register. So if you register a profile and you attach your CV in what's called the EuroPass format, sort of a standardized European format, you can avoid the headache that I mentioned earlier of having to type everything in from scratch on platforms like Indeed and LinkedIn. And then I know, again, I can't speak to how these are in several other countries of the world, but I know that generally you'll see, I think, ADP and Taleo, sort of a couple really big contractors that a lot of large organizations use. And even when you're using the same application portal that different companies use, like if you use Taleo.net for 3 different companies, you still have to type in your information from scratch for all 3. For some reason, even though it's the same company acting as a middleman, they're not able to reuse your information. That's really frustrating. So I would encourage you to add your CV, as you can see here, probably, let's see, a bit but 20% of the people that upload, that enable their researcher profile actually include a CV. So if you're able to front load your time and get that done, you are sort of standing out in a smaller percentile there of people who can then have a CV searched for, and you can be actively sought out. So the number of EURAXESS service centers right now is hovering around 600. These job positions update live. So, I mean, every time I give a presentation or I'm speaking in an info session, I really try to make sure my info is correct from that day. So as of today, there's currently over 11,000 positions. You may be searching on the job portal and find that it's not listing 11,000 job positions, it's listing more or less, and that's because of the way we count positions versus openings or opportunities. The name escapes me at this moment, but basically you might have one job posting that has 5 positions within it. So therefore, I assure you the numbers do match up. This is a screenshot that this, if you zoom in, you'll see that this references Horizon 2020 is the final details for Horizon Europe, which is for 2021 to 2027, get hashed out. The numbers in my example here will be updated, but basically this is a really good way to, depending on the funding source you want, or the country you want to go to, or the field you're in, to whittle down all of these, overwhelming 11,000 options, and then maybe find just a more manageable number that's immediately relevant to you. So again, moving a bit quickly here, we want to help with career development. We receive a lot of support from our central management, from the EURAXESS project, managers within the European Commission. So therefore, we're on the ground. We are sort of that presence for promoting Europe as a research and living destination in the US and Canada. So again, regardless of your nationality, please come to us. Let us know how we can support you. Christina was very, I think, wise in mentioning how we interact with the diaspora groups and support them. So these diaspora groups, particularly for European scientific diaspora, but many of them generally are open to the diaspora members, again, regardless of their field. What's really useful is they're independently operating without our support. We sort of come in and also offer our support on top of that. Oftentimes whether they're large or small, because you get the full spectrum, they face different challenges, but they also face overlapping and common problems that when we come together with an annual meeting, then when we have one-on-one calls with each group separately, we sort of are able to sort of provide a little bit of counsel, provide information exchange, and share the perspective of other groups, and then bring them together in this common forum in December of every year. But it's a really great way to get connected. So regardless of your own personal background, I mean, if you are, just to make up an example, a European from France, you can get connected to one of the French groups. If you are not European, but you did research in Germany, we would connect you to the German group and make sure that you are sort of in touch for whatever research or personal interest you have, and stay connected there. So I would encourage you, on the nature of my job for EURAXESS North America, I'm basically a member of every group, or I'm aware of the activities of every group. So they really tend to have an open door policy and encourage involvement from anyone. So I find it useful for me just to attend a lot of their virtual meetings. And then in the case when we go back to normal, the annual physical meetings of a lot of them as well. So I'm really going to power through here. I mentioned earlier the partnering tools, the information and assistance, and the fact that we'll personalize this for you. When I've been talking a lot about the 8 EURAXESS hubs outside of Europe, but then the national portals as well. So in this transition period with Brexit, that seems to go on and on. The UK does remain involved in a lot of Horizon Europe funding. They will be paying into the budget, even though they're no longer an EU member state. So with very small exceptions about, I think, the Erasmus Plus, Erasmus Mundi's joint master degrees program, which they won't be participating in. And a lot of the other programs, they will be an associated state in that sense, or have the same level of participation as the other EU associated states. So in that case, I know that's a large country of destination for a lot of folks. So be reassured that that remains an option for you. And then if you do have these specific European country or countries in mind where you'd like to go, if you're considering the move to Europe or within Europe as well, the service centers and these national portals basically boil down into 3 different umbrella categories, 18 common topics. The different national portals list them differently, but basically you can say, I really want to know about job opportunities in Finland. Can you please help me out? We can give you some basic information at EURAXESS North America. We can point you to relevant national contact points and partners, but basically the EURAXESS Finland team would be highly relevant, and they'd be able to have calls with you, explain the research landscape there, the job landscape, and this list of 18 different topics is a quick overview on sort of how they divide their expertise and try to support you. This includes things like daycare for your children, because the idea is that Europe is open and family friendly and wants to if you're a researcher, make the move easy for your whole family. So they'll explain the visa process for you, daycare, paying into Social Security, And these three categories are living in Europe, working in Europe, and then if you don't want to be there permanently, leaving Europe. So really it is sort of the whole life cycle. I would say if you're interested in learning more and sort of getting exposed to information like this, the easiest way is to sign up and become a member. Membership simply entails being on our email list. We send bi-monthly emails towards the middle and end of every month with news, generally from the commission, but then also from large groups like important groups like MCAA, the North America chapter, and then funding opportunities both throughout Europe and then occasionally US and Canada-based funding opportunities that may be of interest to European researchers or to the diaspora groups are highlighting in North America. And then events, including virtual events, largely in the last year or so, and occasionally event recordings as well. So if you've missed an event, but the recording is publicly available and the time has passed, we'll highlight that towards the end of that email. So this is a quick summary. We try to link researchers in North America, regardless of nationality. This is really nationality and research field and research level do not matter to Europe, whether it's through diaspora groups, through the funding portal and jobs portal, just explaining what the opportunities are. Obviously promote European funding opportunities. And then in terms of your research career, try to develop, offer development and skills assistance in ways that are relevant for you. So I'm the regional coordinator. We're a two-person office. My colleague, Dr. Daria Buitiner-Karajan, is in the audience, and she and I will be happy to receive your emails here at North America at EURAXESS.net. And I'll be happy to also try to address any questions I can in the Q&A session. So that was a very brief overview. Please send me an email. Let's talk further. And Christina, thank you so much for this opportunity. And we'll get to the Q&A session in the end.
I just say it was brief, but I think it was very rich and really welcoming. So I'm very grateful for this overview. And I know that many of the participants might be aware of this portal of portals, but it can be new for many other people. And what I can assure you is that Delia and Jackson, they show a level of availability and personal commitment that I've rarely seen. I mean, you can always contact them and organize meetings with them and send emails, and it will be anytime they will be there for you, and you will have this feeling of being part of a family. That's something we are always insisting upon from the North America chapter, and that's why I'm so happy to have the team that we have now, and I'm so honored to be the chair of this chapter, because it really does feel like a family, and our collaboration with EURAXESS North America, I think it makes it even more visible. I have some questions for you, maybe for the Q&A,
yeah,
but I will give priority to the participants. So
great. If I can jump in for one more minute. So basically, I did try to give sort of the standard presentation and I think match your tone, which is really needed right now. I have a quick note or two to myself that I think in a more casual manner I can just quickly address. So I mentioned that Horizon Europe, a lot of these details are being finalized, even though we're a few months into it, but the 95.5 billion euro funding amount there has been the political agreement for that. So I think that's a really important first step. Even though last year we did a lot of info sessions on Horizon 2020 and the final year of the previous 7-year framework program, you'll find that this year, even when we do the same types of information sessions and just promotion of these opportunities, a lot of this will be so new that we'll have extra support. There will be changes, so there'll be more opportunities to say what's different. So I would encourage people to stay in touch. This is really relevant, I think, for Marie Curie Alumni Association members, because they, as alumni of these actions and these fellowships, you understand the process of applying for commission funding, and you've sort of walked the walk. So you can hit the ground running and understand a lot of this from the get-go. I mentioned earlier, for example, the 5-part webinar series on how to get published in conjunction with publisher Taylor and Francis. I'll share a link to that momentarily. And then again, just a bit informally, I mentioned that we work with the diaspora groups, and they're already all in North America, that is, the European Scientific Diaspora Groups or diaspora groups generally. They have a lot of events specific to their members, and then I said a lot of them are open to everybody. So I would say if you hop on our website, we will be revamping it in a couple months. I'll also drop a link to the specific portion of our website, but basically there's a list of all the European countries that have diaspora groups in the US and or Canada, and then links to their social media and to their website. So I would encourage people to get in touch with the ones that are of interest. So for example, I'll just give a quick plug to the Swedish network, STARS. they're having an event in April on research jobs in academia and industry. And I know oftentimes a lot of these webinars that you'll hear about are either academia or industry focused only, one of the two. In this case, panelists will be addressing both. And this is just one example that I was recently promoting. But all the diaspora groups are having virtual events and eventually in-person events like this. So I would say if you have a passing interest in Sweden, it's a really interesting way to get a look into how the Swedish group and the Swedish Americans as well, and then the non-Swedes that just have maybe done a semester abroad in Sweden or just interested in certain industries that Sweden tends to be strong in, how they all interact and support each other. And then in a similar sense, it's sort of a coincidence, the Swedish group does something on almost a monthly basis called the Fika, the Swedish sort of coffee chat. And this is sort of a speed dating style networking that they do. And the events tend to be nice and small and intimate. So I'll be connected, I'll join as a member and I'll be connected for 5 minutes with a different member in a Zoom breakout room. And then at the end of an hour, we all met, we've all sort of exchanged information, and then we connect further on LinkedIn. We sort of, if someone's looking for opportunities, since I'm representing EURAXESS North America in my attendance, I'll give them that information, and we all sort of are better off for the relationships we develop. I give this as an example of something that we can also do at EURAXESS North America, but we want to do in conjunction with you. So when Christina says to please be in touch with my colleague and I, this is what we're talking about. If you represent a postdoc association or you're a member of a postdoc association and you think that you don't have the hosting capabilities, but you do have the members that have a need, let us fill that vacuum and try to make this an event for you. So that's one example. We're really happy to think out loud and try to find ways to support you. So thank you for allowing me to extend a little bit, Christina.
No, I think it helps a lot, and it's very much in line with the tone we wanted to give to this event, because everything has been so difficult that having just this friendly conversation, and as you said, all these informal approaches, I think it increases the accent we have on availability and commitment, that we are here for you. We might not have all the answers, but we might know somebody who knows somebody who does. So we're always happy to connect these networks of solidarity and collaboration, and to make this space bigger than it seems, which was something very close to my heart when I thought of organizing this event. And when I thought of inviting Daria Jackson from EURAXESS North America, I wanted to show you how friendly they are, how nice they are. So I didn't want you to picture, an institutional face like something mechanical or bureaucratic. It's like, no, it will be always a friendly conversation, and it will always welcome any kind of doubt. I mean, please don't hesitate to send questions via the chat or ask any questions. I also feel guilty because I was having a look at the list of participants for this event, and I saw a very active person in the European diasporas and world diasporas in North America, who's Sina Safaji, coordinating not just the diaspora from Iran in the US, but many international interconnected diasporas in this kind of platforms, which might be totally unknown to the audience today, but they're another way of talking about having a career development, developing opportunities, cooperating beyond all these four walls of our small rooms in this timeline. So space is bigger than it seems, and I think this brings me the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Professor Michael Williams. And now we are connecting sunny Pittsburgh with Syracuse, and I feel really honored to introduce Michael, also because of your generosity and availability. And I would like to say that this is just episode 1. We will have you again on March 18th. We're organizing an event which will talk about a very crucial issue, which is where to go from here in terms of transatlantic relations. And Gary Thomas, Bill Davis from the School of International Service at the American University will also be joining to talk about, okay, what happens now with transatlantic relations? There's a new government. We have gone through many relevant social movements in the US. What is it changing? And that would be episode 2. So today we're dealing with the first contribution. And let me just give you an overview of Professor Williams' expertise. He's an associate professor of international affairs and director of international relations graduate programs at the Maswell School for Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. He's an expert on transatlantic security issues, and his most recent book is entitled Science, Law, and Liberalism in the American Way of War, published by Cambridge University Press. And before giving you the floor, I would like to say that Michael had a career in the United Kingdom, so on the other side of the Atlantic, because before developing his career further in the US, so I thought, okay, this is ideal. You have been on both sides, and you know both professional cultures and languages and approaches to apply for jobs and to develop a career. So you have these languages of the mind that we hope you can translate today in your conversation. And without further ado, you have the floor, and we feel very honored for your presence here today with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some thoughts and my experience. So, as Christina said, I actually went to graduate school in Europe for both of my master's and my PhD. So I did my master's in Berlin at the Humboldt and Freie Universitäten, and I did my PhD at the London School of Economics and Political Science, and started at a think tank, and then went to Royal Holloway. And so I had a whole career. I made Reader in the UK, which is sort of tenured associate professor. And then, for better or worse, made a fateful decision to come back to the US and mainly for work closer to policy. I will admit I do miss London every day, but it has been good career-wise. And I came over as a clinical professor, which means a permanent professor on a contract. At NYU is 5-year rolling contracts, but I wasn't tenured. And that is good, but also has limitations, which I'm happy to chat with you about if you're interested. But what it did do is it helped me bridge the Atlantic. And my plan was then to move to a tenure position, which is what happened. And at Syracuse, they had a role, and I applied, and I got offered the gig. So we can talk about how you move between systems depending on where you are in your career. So the US job process, and I can talk about the UK one if you're interested as well. But the US job process is actually really formalized and pretty easy to follow. The first thing is I would recommend is that all the jobs, for the most part, 100% are listed by APSA, which is the American Political Science Association. Now, I do international relations. I don't actually consider myself a political scientist. I went to a APSA conference years ago, but I do not go. I go to ISA conferences. But the APSA Jobs Board is where basically every single job that is posted in the US is posted, and a few international schools also advertise there. So like Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, some of the top international schools will post their jobs there. So you really need to be a member of APSA to get access to that board. There's a trick. It says, are you a political scientist or not? There's different rates, and of course, and there's different rates depending on how long you've been in your career, et cetera. So because I didn't want any of their publications, because no offense to anyone, but I don't need to read, I don't do, I don't follow that area of research. I'm more of an international sociologist or whatever. I always clicked an affiliate membership, which is a much lower cost of money. I think it was like $90 a year. It pays for itself in terms of the job applications. It's where everyone posts everything in the US. So that's the number one thing. If you're interested in jobs in the UK, it's jobs.ac.uk. That's the number one stop shop for the UK. The hiring process in the US is on I don't know if you may or may not be aware, so I'm going to start here, but it's on a year-long cycle. Essentially, jobs are posted in sort of September, October time, and are usually due in November time, around there. So it's like, early autumn, late autumn. They shortlist usually after the holiday. It depends. Sometimes they shortlist before the winter break, but there's usually a shortlist and invitation for interviews in sort of January, February. Sometimes they do informational interviews, or they schedule interviews at the conferences at ISA and or APSA. But usually traditionally they fly you out. And that process is really intense. It's much more intense than anything I did in the UK, at least. It's usually 2 or 3 days long. It involves a job talk, where you talk about your research, past, present, and future. They'll usually ask you to talk about teaching pedagogy as well, and sort of courses. You'll have several meetings. You'll have group meetings with faculty that are tenured. You'll have group meetings with faculty that aren't tenured yet. You'll have meetings with students. You'll usually, if you're on the short list, then you usually meet with the dean, you might meet with associate deans, you'll meet with the HR team. So it's really a marathon, like drink lots of water and eat big meals. And there's usually formal meals too. There's usually a dinner with an interview panel, sometimes 2 dinners, or sometimes a lunch and a dinner. So it's a 2 to 3 day process usually in the US. It's really intense for tenure track, especially positions. But even for my clinical position at NYU, it was a solid 2 days of interviews. And it's literally like 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. So it's quite a process. And then offers usually go out in March for positions that always start sort of usually 1st of August, 1st September. And that's it. It doesn't deviate. There's deviations sometimes when something comes up late. 99% of the jobs follow on that. And, you know, we're in the process of now requesting funding for jobs for next year. Like the stuff for this fall is already set. And we're actually, you know, the higher ed environment in the US, like everywhere right now, is all over the place. Some schools, I mean, to speak frankly, you know, my old school, NYU, is in a tough position. NYU has a relatively small endowment, not compared to European schools, but compared to American schools, it has a very small endowment. It's an extremely tuition-driven university. And there have been everything's kind of on freeze, hiring freezes, research spending freezes. You know, there's a lot, everything's on freeze. At the Maxwell School, though, the Maxwell School is not as tuition dependent. The Syracuse University has a good endowment for the size of its population. We're about 21,000 students, grad and undergrad, whereas NYU is like 60,000. It's the largest private university in the United States. And so the Maxwell School stayed in the black the whole time. And we're in the process of hiring something like 12 lines, tenure track or tenure lines, which is a lot. It's going to vary, state schools versus private schools. We could always talk about that in the Q&A, but the hiring process is the same. And the interview process is the same, and the locations where they advertise are the same. So there are jobs available, but it's just going to depend. State universities are probably going to be, not surprisingly, squeezed more, depending on revenues. But what we've also seen in the US market, and you've probably seen it abroad, depending on where you are, is that there's a rush to graduate degrees because the economy's been bad. So both last year and this year, application numbers are up. And more students want to go. I deal only with graduate students now, but you know, our master's programs have swelled because people are seeking refuge, and of course, this then creates demand, right, for additional instructors. The gold standard, I would say, in the US is to try and get a tenure track position, as Christina's on, and or tenured. It's very hard to get tenured from outside the system, but you can be brought in if you're an established scholar, usually from Europe. But most of the time you'll be a tenured track. Note that I came in as a clinical professor, which was not tenured. I did 6 years. I was in an administrative role where essentially I was a chair, and that's part of what got me hired at Syracuse, because I have run lots of projects and academic programs. But I also have a book with Cambridge and 2 books with Routledge and a book with Palgrave and a second book under contract at Cambridge. So someone had asked in an earlier question about, you know, what's the basic criteria, which I can talk about. My parents are both professors. Publish. That's like all I can tell, and publish in the top tier journals. Obviously, it's not easy to get into top tier journals. The good news is that unlike in the UK, the US is much more subjective. I mean, there's definitely what they consider the top tier, but they'll look at things that are specialists in your field, like Armed Forces and Society, for example, which is the main journal in that area of what I work on. But the publications will help you bridge everything. So I was in a particularly disadvantageous position because I'm an American who went to the LSE, whereas they're like, well, why didn't you go to school X in the US? You being a European with a European degree doesn't hurt you as much, but quite frankly, there is a lot of ethnocentrism in American higher education focused on American degrees. So I don't want to lie, but can be a barrier to entry. What eliminates that barrier is if you are applying with, you know, a PhD from Barcelona, great place, but you then have a book with Cambridge and an article with IS and an article in International Studies Review or something. You know what I mean? Like that helps. The publications are what matters the most. So, and I don't know if I can do it here, but I also wanted to show you, let me do it this way. I'll do the share screen. I wanted to actually show you a CV. So this is another very, and if I could put it into the chat, I would, but this is a great example of an American CV, which is from my friend Heidi Hart, actually. And you can see how she's got her name and a location up at the top, followed by education, simple space, and make it follow this, even if you didn't have necessarily a committee or whatnot. Sometimes people list their committee people. Follow the format as close as you can. Despite, notice Heidi went to the LSE for her, and actually Heidi went to the Graduate Institute. So Heidi is another example of someone who has come from Europe. See, so we can do this. And she did her undergrad in the US just like I did, followed by publications. So single authored peer review books, 2 books with Oxford, phenomenal, right? And then her peer-reviewed journal articles, so EGIR, phenomenal, Journal of Global Security Studies, Newer Journal, Journal of Politics. So you see a range. PS, which is this not second tier, but it's another journal of the American Political Science Association, Review of International Organizations. So you can see she's got a great set of lists. Then she goes into peer-reviewed book chapters. Then she has research projects. So it's very, and they're very long. I don't, I can't speak to how it works in Germany or whatnot, but basically you list everything you've ever done. And so then it'll eventually go into, I think here, so these are non-peer reviewed articles. I break mine into policy reports and op-eds, especially when there's more consideration of impact these days. That helps if you're writing op-eds in your field. And then of course, book reviews, grants, which she's had quite a bit of money, but you list everything, even small little grants, $1,200. And then let's see, usually professional honors and awards, reviews, which is a big deal, of your works, reviews who you review for, interviews, which is great, professional affiliations. And then she's listing her teaching. So there's variations, obviously, but this just gives you, and she's listed all of her jobs later. I listed mine earlier, but this is and if I can figure out how to share this, if Christina or Jackson tell me how to do it, I've never shared anything in the chat before, I'd happily post this, or you can go to HeidiHart.com and her CV is right there. But this is a great example when you're trying to apply in a system, make it look like what they're expecting. They also always expect a cover letter, which is pretty typical, but usually addressing your research, which is what they're very concerned about, and then your teaching pedagogy and approach like that. So let me stop that and come back to here. Let me think. A couple other things, I guess. One of the great things to try and do in terms of networking, is go to your professional conferences and events, chat with panelists that you're sharing, go to other sessions and chat. I'd like to say there's like online, like LinkedIn. I mean, have a LinkedIn profile, keep it up to date. I don't know anyone who really looks at it necessarily, right? For academic jobs. It's really old school. It's look at the job board, apply for the jobs. Postdocs are very useful though. So if if you can look at different centers, and especially the more prestigious schools have them, and they have lots of money, and they're not averse giving them to people from abroad, because that actually diversifies their academic environment. So lots of friends from Europe have gone to Harvard, have gone to Princeton to do postdocs, which then help sort of polish you up and be like, oh, well, they did a PhD there, they went to Harvard and did a postdoc. That definitely reflects well. Look at something like SWAMOS, which is the Summer Workshop on Military Affairs, SWAMOS. It's run by Elliot Cohen, takes place upstate New York in Ithaca. That's a great opportunity if you're an international security person. I can only really speak to the IR stuff. That's what I do. Another really good project is Bridging the Gap Project, which is a great networking tool. They're focused on helping scholars engage with policy better and promoting opportunities. They do training once a year. They select a group of a cohort, which I did, and they work on how to make your research more accessible. So it's another avenue. The other thing I would encourage you to think about, which is sort of now coming to Europe, but we have a division in the US between political science departments and government departments, and then schools of public policy, international affairs, international relations. At the Maxwell School at Syracuse, we're actually all in one faculty. We're not one faculty, we're in one school, which actually encompasses all of our social sciences, in which we include history, by the way. Sometimes that's a humanity in the US. At NYU is considered a humanity. So we're all different. We have a political science department. We have a sociology department. We have an economics department. We have history. We also have public administration and international affairs. We also have international affairs and IR people in political science. It's a little weird. But then at some places, like in Georgetown, you have your School of Foreign Service, which will have its own faculty. And then you'll have a Department of Government, right? And then there's a School of Public Policy. Same thing at Harvard, right? There's the Department of Government at Harvard, and then there's the Kennedy School. They're not the same thing. Faculty from the Kennedy School may have an affiliation at the, at the government department may have an affiliation at the Kennedy School, but the Kennedy School for Public Policy and International Affairs, right, is its own thing. And so those are more policy-oriented PhDs and policy-oriented programs that may be more open to international PhDs. And that's another avenue that I would suggest you look at. Quite frankly, depends on the school. Pure political science departments in the US are going to be very much based on quantitative methods, rational choice and game theory. It all depends. And when I went to NYU, people were like, wait, you're going to NYU? Because NYU's politics department is like the bastion of game theory. And I barely add. You know, I'm a constructivist. I'm an international relations theorist. I'm a very policy-oriented person. My work is all archival research. I would not ever get tenure in the politics department at NYU. I was hired in the graduate school in an independent program as a clinical professor, mind you. And then I used it to get the tenure at Syracuse because they're much more open-minded to methods. The political science department at Syracuse is multi-method, quantitative methods, qualitative methods, game theory, archival research, theorists, you know, political economists, you name it. So you've got to know where you're applying. You know, if you're a really constructivist, post-structuralist, one of the best places to apply in the US would be University of Minnesota, right? Their department is really avant-garde and interesting, their politics department, but that's rare, right? So you've got to know. University of Delaware has a politics and international relations department, and they're more open to different methods. But again, NYU, pure rational choice game theory. So you've got to know kind of the department. Don't waste your time, right? They're not gonna they wouldn't shortlist me. Snowball's chance in hell. So just know your departments, research the departments, reach out to people. And especially if you see someone who is from Europe, and Maxwell School is a great opportunity. I'm not the first person with a PhD from abroad. Johannes Himmelreich, who's a colleague who's not tenured, he started there. He actually went to LSE as well. He's a German national. So there are those opportunities. So I'm going to stop there. I hope that was a good overview of the process, and let us take some questions before we wrap up.
Okay, thank you so much for this immersion, and we are very grateful for this insider view of both systems, I mean, both perspectives and approaches. Thank you also for sharing this example of a CV. Before we go to the Q&A, I would have a question also related to the title we gave to this event, which is Beyond the Freeze, because of course, I mean, you were very realistic in talking about the hiring freeze, which is a reality. I mean, it was not just for 2020, this is something going on. Is there a way to know, because you mentioned the differences between public and private universities, which are the most affected, where are more opportunities? Some institutions might not be that affected by the freeze. So is there like a map of US institutions from that point of view?
Yeah, no, there's not really. I mean, one thing I would highly recommend if you're interested in American higher education is to read the Chronicle of Higher Education. Yeah. So the Chronicle, as it's known, everyone just calls it the Chronicle, is a bit like the Times Higher Education Supplement, but it's very specific to the academy. It's read by you know, administrators and faculty and everyone. It's like the de facto weekly newspaper for higher education in America. And it's also great too, because the Chronicle publishes, for example, publishes salaries from across universities. So you can do comparisons, and there are differences, and so that's probably one of the best places to stay abreast of information and get an idea of who's most affected and how. But that said, a lot of schools there really isn't a resource. The thing is, because some schools are using this as an opportunity to take actions that they may have otherwise wanted to take and are putting it in the guise of the pandemic, but they don't necessarily need to. And even then, schools like Harvard are, insanely resourced. They'll be just fine. But they've also, everything froze because everyone remembers how their endowments were hit. And an endowment, by the way, as I'm sure you all know, but just, people at NYU have been like, well, why don't you use the endowment, which is very small at NYU compared to the size of the university. And it's like endowments are not used for running costs, right? Endowments are used to generate revenue that you pump into the university, but you don't touch the principal. So there were some very heated discussions about, well, touch the principal so we can keep all the PhD students on another year on funding, which totally is lovely and humane. And I'd be like, sure, do that. But actually, the provost will never allow that because that's the long-term financial health of the university. So what I would say, if you want to think beyond the freeze, is that in all actuality, most universities, the strongest universities in general, which include all the state Research 1 schools in the US. And that's how we break them down: Research 1, Research 2, 3. R1s are all of your main flagship universities. So Harvard is an R1, Syracuse is an R1, University of Connecticut, University of Delaware, University of Virginia. And then in Connecticut, we have the UConn system, University of Connecticut. So Storrs is the number 1, R1. And then there's the Central Connecticut State University system, the CSU system, and there's Central, Southern, Eastern, Western, which is the second tier. So this is another thing to think about. And I just remember too, for European PhDs, a great opportunity would actually be liberal arts colleges. So we have research universities, again, Syracuse, Princeton, USC, University of Texas system, versus say Bates College, Hamilton College, Union College, right? Wesleyan, where I've taught before as a visiting professor, Wellesley, where Hillary Clinton went to school. These are excellent schools that compensate very well, that have relatively mild, similar teaching loads, 2-2 loads, and are very secure gigs, and they're more open to hiring European PhDs. So that's something else to probably forget, but there's not really a direct resource. I would say that most schools in the US are well endowed. They'll come through it fine. And I would anticipate that within the next year, the hiring freezes come up. We've never even had a hiring freeze though at Maxwell. So you definitely just have to take it on a case-by-case basis. But I think that even the states, they've just revealed state funding, and very few states actually in the last year have lost tons of revenue. There was this prediction that there'd be terrible revenue loss for states, and a lot of states have done really well, aside from a few. Like Florida took a hit. It's a tourist state, right? New York took a hit because the city really got hammered, but California, their revenue's up. So that means that funding for state universities is still around. So I do honestly feel very optimistic about over the next year, things getting better. And I think the other thing we've seen is that although there will be much more greater utilization of Zoom and online platforms, it will be to supplement in-person education. I don't think anyone is running around going like, let's only do university on Zoom. The students certainly are, right? And faculty may, but I actually take away the opposite of what a lot of people thought of. Oh, here's the future of higher ed, especially in the US. If you're in the US now, you'll know the US undergrad education is an experience. It's a bit like Disneyland of higher education. I mean that in a nice way. It's different than in Europe. I hear friends are like, oh, Germany, no one pays tuition. And I loved Germany. I had a great education in a master's program that was distinct. But at the undergrad level, I did it. And it was like, people are sitting on the stairs in the lecture hall because there aren't enough seats, So American undergrads, like the people will talk about wanting a free education, of which I am very supportive of extremely low cost state schools. But, it's not all roses, right? And so I think that there is funding, and it will be fine in another year. People want the experience. They want to be on campus. They want to go to school sports. They want to, see their professors and have their office hours in person. And so there will be hiring, and most schools, I think, will come out. This healthy schools will come out just fine, and there are plenty of those in the U.S.
Okay, thank you very much for going deeper into the question, because I think it opens up all these horizons we want to share here today. And I think there was also, I will open the Q&A now, but I think there was also a very interesting point of connection between both presentations. Michael, you mentioned like the currency to advance, to have this career development in academia, but also maybe to move forward is publications, and top tier and high quality and impactful publications. And I'm very happy that EURAXESS North America is precisely offering this series of events about getting published with Taylor and Francis as an example of how to move forward in this direction. So I think this is a perfect interconnection. But I'm very interested about the questions and the doubts and the suggestions from the audience. So please, I'm very happy to take your questions. And as you see, we have very different perspectives, a very practical one, this insider's point of view from both sides of the Atlantic in Michael Williams. So feel welcome.
I'd say go to Europe. All those funding opportunities look fabulous.
Yeah.
Michael's doing my job for me. I can only echo those comments. I'll just say,
by the way, I will highly endorse it. You're talking to someone who spent 14 years in the European Union, in the UK and in Germany, and traveled extensively there. And there are great. The academic culture is wonderful. The research opportunities are wonderful. There's lots of research money. The societies are all great societies to live in. Many of you are from Europe. I view it very much as for me, it's been a Euro-Atlantic career, and I view it as a Euro. And Jackson and I were talking earlier, it's not even brain drain. It's not a brain rotation, you can definitely do it. And if you start, if you want to come to the U.S., but you get funding opportunity in Europe, great, go take it. And then take my advice, which is publish. And that really bridges the gap. That's the biggest thing. If you walk up with a book from a top university press and some strong articles, you will be competitive. That's what it takes. PhD is important, but they're definitely looking at they're going to look at, quite frankly, PhD line and then publications. And that's how it works.
I think that yesterday, Jackson, you received an email with a question from one of the participants.
Yeah, let me, yes. So we obviously have the Q&A box right now where people can ask questions live. I'll work with all the panelists with Christina and Michael afterwards. If everyone consents, we'll try to put the recording online. So if you want to ask a question anonymously, just check that box. We won't read your name. And then if there's any technical issues, I would encourage people just to use the chat to let us know. But other than that, let me pull up a question during registration. So someone asks, what are the basic criteria that universities in the US and or Canada look for in hiring a new faculty who does not have any educational degree from North America? And maybe Michael touched on that in his presentation or his comments, but I would, Christine, I'm sure either one of you would probably be better positioned than I am to answer that.
Okay, Michael, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Like I said, I think that the main thing, if you don't have that, is the publications, right? And where it's really the publications at the end of the day. Like that's honestly the number one thing. I don't know if Christina wants to add anything to it. Make sure your CV looks like an American CV. If you can do a postdoc, right, that helps burnish it. But if you're just coming from Europe and applying, your publications are going to be your number one thing. The other thing is, depending on what you do right now, there is definitely room for niche stuff, right? So there's more of an interest in feminism and feminist IR. And so there might be, the great thing about Europe is that there's a plurality or a diversity of approaches and subjects, which are now becoming a little more mainstream than popular. So if you work on queer theory, women, that sort of stuff, there's more uptake, and there's not people trained in the US to they're always looking at everything through this quantitative or rational choice lens. So there could be some angles there. And you also, depending on, and this is only for political science. If you're in a different field, I can't speak as much. I would say though, publications tend to rule the roost for everything. And my parents were engineers and nursing professors, and they just kept saying publish, publish, publish. But it's pretty good advice. I hate to say that, but it's something you have control over after you finish your PhD. Is you can focus on getting out the book and getting your research, and then once it's published, get it reviewed by people too. That's another thing.
Okay, I think there's also this dimension of networking that we were mentioning before, like keeping in touch with specialists in your area, and that's where maybe EURAXESS, as we mentioned at the beginning of the event, can help. Like you have all these professional conferences, you have all these events, and more or less the experts in the area, and you keep on finding the same people. It doesn't depend on the discipline. I mean, it can be anything. Life and experimental sciences. We're talking more about social science and humanities. Also because when I was talking to fellows in this area, they were telling me, okay, so now I'm a Marie Curie fellow, and then there's the void. I mean, there's the end of everything. There's nothing coming afterwards. And they were really pessimistic. So I wanted to offer an overview that there's a continuation in this journey, and this is just a phase. So,
and I think actually, use your time as a fellow and elsewhere to another thing to do is to carve out relationships with American scholars, and particularly with more advanced American scholars. So that's another thing that I worked on from Europe. And you can do from anywhere, but you got to sort of be realistic and be like everyone's like, oh, John Mearsheimer, like run the John Mearsheimer, something like that. Which can work. By the way, John Mearsheimer gave me the best feedback I ever got on a paper in my field, although he's methodologically very different than me. But the thing is, I developed through research and work that I was doing relationships with some really key people in the field. So many years ago, but Jim Goldgeier, who Jackson may know, who is a professor at GW and later at American, and then became dean at American. We got to know each other through my research and writing. He was a fan of my work. He became a mentor. He was a reference letter writer for me. He's a tenure letter. So having that's another really important aspect is to get, there's a few scholars, there's definitely scholars in Europe that are internationally known that would be great to have writing letters for you too, by all means, right? Kim Hutchings or, Thomas Risse in Berlin, to name two people, right? But at the same time, you want to try and have some American qualifiers, right? So use your time when you're doing your fellowships and whatnot to reach out to people and have them read your work and engage with you and get to know you, because that can really, they usually ask for 3 to 5 references. Sometimes if it's tenure track associate, they want 5 if you're early career. And if you could have 3 that were American, or Canadian, that would make a huge difference to your application. By the way, the Canadian hiring process is pretty much identical to the US one, but they're much more receptive to international PhDs, in particular from the UK. So that's one thing for you. It's an easier market to get into.
Yeah, I think there's a very interesting synergy between both presentations, because I think EURAXESS can provide this way of meeting these potential mentors and persons who write reference letters, and you can provide a platform for that. For the time being.
Yeah, doing things like Bridging the Gap project, postdocs, SWAMOS, the summer workshop in military affairs. Those are all ways to get to know, because they're run by senior scholars. So you get to know those senior scholars and develop a relationship and get them reading your work. And then they can write quality letters that helps, in addition to your excellent references from Europe, which will really, help make a comprehensive package.
Yeah, I think also the model of cover letters, which is something very, very typical of the American system, has a different approach from motivation letters in Europe. So I don't know if you could talk more about that.
The thing is, well, part of the reason having an American references in general help, because the general references are different, right? you know, in the UK, if you said, oh, Michael Williams is quite good, that means like, he's amazing, hire him right now, right? But they would phrase it as American Michael Williams is quite good. Whereas in the United States, when they write a reference letter, they're like, after Michael Williams invented fire, you know, he went on to like, you know, discover gravity. Like, it's like the reference letters are really, and this is just for regular jobs, they're much more effusive. They're not understated. In the US system, it doesn't pay to be understated. It's not an understated country. And it's true, it took me a while because I had been living in Europe for so long and I was very encultured in the British mentality, which is almost a little more, if someone wants something too much, people try to thwart them because they're seen as like too striving. That is not necessarily the case in the US at all. Like, it's extremely ambitious, and people reward ambition, and they like ambition, and they like assertiveness. And so it's definitely not a time to be, you really want your letter to be, you know, well written and crisp, and be very clear about why you're awesome and why you should be hired. If you can get your hands on some, that would be helpful. I don't have tons. I can't share ones either that are submitted to us because they're confidential, but you want a strong, positive reference letter for yourself, your application, your cover letter. You know, don't downplay your achievements. Definitely upplay them in the US system. Don't lie, don't put incorrect material on your CV, don't put things that might happen, you know, have the book under contract, right? But definitely don't hesitate to talk about your research and impact, but then even the teaching angle too, that is important. And that's even more, if you're applying to a liberal arts college, they're more interested, they're going to want you to look good academic research wise, but they're really interested in teaching because they pride themselves on their teaching and learning environment. So your teaching profile helps you more than it would at an R1. R1s are going to say they want a good teacher, but they really want the research and publications. As you all know, we all want to get a tenure job, and then we want to teach as little as possible, which is terrible, but it's sort of true. So,
yeah. What about student evaluations? I mean, as following what you're saying, I guess they are more important in these liberal art colleges or than
teaching evaluations are important across the board if they have them. Yeah, they'll want them for all the jobs. I submitted all my teaching evaluations from 6 years at NYU to Syracuse, so it's definitely a big deal. And American universities now, pretty much across the board, do teaching evaluations. I mean, we could obviously talk about whether they're great or not, but in terms of like the whole process and anonymous and students get to say things, but I should say also too, people read them and understand, right, that like you know, by and large, like if they're overwhelming, you know, most of the time they're positive, and you know, the few that aren't are usually people understand, right? You can read through an evaluation, but they're definitely important. And whether it's an R1 or a liberal arts school, it's just that the liberal arts school is going to have less of an emphasis on your research and publications background. They're still going to want it, but there's a stronger chance that coming from Europe, you'd be very competitive. And again, the jobs are paid the same. And it's just in the hierarchy of education, it's the R1s that are considered the ones that you want to really be at if you want to be the researcher. But I've taught at Wesleyan University. I loved it. It was a phenomenal place. It's a liberal arts college. The students are extremely smart. And they're sort of like the students who couldn't get into like Harvard or Princeton. And so then they go to like Wesleyan. And so there's a great environment and good research funds and really phenomenal campus infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure is great in a lot of the American schools. So there's benefits.
What about, because there's something that I heard from other professionals as well, interdisciplinary collaboration. Some say, oh, this is great, you know, this is the future. And others say, oh, this is a risk because you are getting away from your area of specialization. How do you see that?
That's a great question. I think that's a great question. So I'm a fan of interdisciplinary work. I do kind of interdisciplinary work myself. I also always tell people, when I meet students and they're like, oh, I want to go do a PhD in Europe. I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to do with your PhD, right? So when I meet a student and they're like, well, I want to be a professor in the United States, I'm like, no, then you must go to the United States. Now, if you're coming from Europe and you're European, you have a European PhD, that's a little different, right? But if it's an American student, I always feel like, no, go to a US school. If you want to work in policy, then you could definitely do a European PhD, no problem. But don't look. I always say I'm not a good example. Like I've thrived despite the odds, and it wasn't always maybe the easiest. So I think interdisciplinary work is good. There's definitely an emphasis on it, and so we're hiring 5 cluster jobs at the Maxwell School that are interdisciplinary. Right. So there's definitely opportunities, but they're more specific. I guess my strict advice would be that early on in your career, you need to do what professionally rewards you, which is probably to focus on work in your career, your academic field, and to get published in those top journals and the best journals you can, and then go from there, right? Diversify out once you've gotten a name in your specific field, because the problem is it's very hard to, I wouldn't be able to get a job in an international history department, even though I do a lot of historically informed research. I'm not a historian, right? So you don't want to end up being neither here nor there. So I would suggest focusing on your specific field earlier in your career. And then as you go along the career path, then looking at interdisciplinary opportunities. If you're already interdisciplinary, then keep an eye out for those sort of gigs, because they do pop up, and there's it's a buzzword in the academy, but I'm not sure that the hiring is very rarely in the US across departments. It's per department. So you need to meet the qualifications in each field, right, for tenure, as opposed to like, oh, well, they published in that great sociological journal. It's like a political scientist doesn't even know what the great sociological journals are. They probably don't even know where the sociology department's located in their school. So I say that tongue in cheek, but I would focus on the field you're in to start.
Okay, Jackson, I think there are some questions. I don't know. Can you see them?
Mainly comments.
Yes, so okay, I hope the two of you can see them as well. I do have a question that came into the Q&A. It's actually just a very nice compliment. So I don't know if I want to follow Michael's example of being a bit understated and going British style and not patting yourself on the back too much.
Yeah, American Jackson.
but I'll read Sergio's comment, just saying that he's congratulating everyone. I'm sure particularly you, Christina, on this illustrative and complete seminar. I think I suppose in his example, it's a bit difficult to get adjusted to the Canadian system. Coming from a European PhD background and training. So I just want to emphasize that I won't speak for anyone else, but I know at EURAXESS North America, we're sort of here to help address specific follow-up questions you may have, to sort of set the expectation. Oftentimes, we will not be the final authority or source on a certain question. Oftentimes, we'll refer you to a national contact point if that position exists in the US or Canada. Oftentimes, they don't. Certain non-European countries will have a lot of NCPs for every different funding program, for every different topic. In our case, it sort of depends here and there. And I believe the NCPs are being sort of refreshed and updated for Horizon Europe. So I can't even right now say with complete confidence which programs will and won't have them. But we'll always be able to connect you to the appropriate person, whether it's North America based or Europe based, to answer your questions. And hopefully also be those helpful middlemen that will help provide the trainings that are useful to you. I'm going to explore, again, I'll work with Christina and Michael. I'm now addressing the whole audience here. Explore if we have the option of doing like a post-event survey between now and 24 hours from now, when that automated email goes out, to maybe, and if regardless, if that works out or not, I would just invite people to maybe either send Christina or send me like a 2 or 3 sentence email just with your own background and why you signed up for this event in the first place, why you thought it was useful for you, and with regards to a particular job search or just your professional academic background, and that can maybe help us do a joint event in the future, or just inform our sort of reporting and our planning for the future. So I know I'm sort of a broken record and just saying that I seem a bit uncreative because I'm sort of outsourcing our event planning to you, but we want it to be as relevant as possible to our audience. So please, I would really encourage people just to send me an unsolicited email, since I'm requesting it now. So it's not unsolicited by any means, with what would be useful for you, and we'll sort of put our heads together and see what we can do. So I will put my shared email with my colleague and I, so that we're both seeing it and you get an answer a bit more quickly, right now in the chat to everyone. And then I will allow Christina, if you want to read this question that came in, that I think you can take the most recent Q&A.
I think it's a very relevant question, and it reminds me of my first experience being a Marie Curie Global Fellow at the University of Pittsburgh. There was a reception at the Department of History, and they were asking me, so what are you doing here? So, I'm a Marie Curie Global Fellow. And they were like, Marie Curie? And then they were calling everybody from the history department, like, for the first time ever, we have a chemist attending our reception. So I'm not a chemist. I'm a historian with you. You never know. So far, I'm not a chemist. So that gave me the impression that at least, they all knew who Marie Curie is, but the Marie Curie Fellowship was not that well known inside the institutions. So I think we have a lot of work to do. I will read the question.
Was that for like the history department, or was that for Oh, so I think in IR, again, like international relations, fellowships always look prestigious no matter what they are, right? Because someone has decided your research is valuable and is giving you money, right? And is hosting you somewhere. So they're all going to look at it and go, oh, again, now I'm a little confused whether it's me because I'm an international relations person who's worked internationally in Europe, or whether it's my field. But when I see Marie Curie fellowships, Max Weber fellowships at the EUI, these sort of things, I go, oh, woof, like if someone is a Marie Curie fellow or a Max Weber fellow at EUI, that means a lot to me. But I guess I'm not entirely sure if it's just me or if it's my field, but I feel like even in the political science departments that everyone knows that their research grants from the European Union or the EUI, which is the European Union. So but fellowships are always regarded positively because someone is funding your research, which means that your research is worthwhile. So yes, they're looked at. Even if they don't necessarily maybe know what it is, they'll at least go, oh, a fellowship, and someone's given them money. So yeah. And don't hesitate, again, to explain. You say, I'm a Marie Curie fellowship, and make a point of saying it's like so many billions of euros of funding that are given to top scholars, and I received it, don't explain it, don't assume they know. Make sure that they understand what a big deal it is to get one of these, and help educate them as to the value of that fellowship.
Yeah, I have the impression, before I give the floor to Jackson, who also wants to contribute to this question and to this reply. For example, Fulbright fellowships, they are an entry point. They're, they have this prestige, this social consideration. And when you come to the US and say, I'm a Marie Curie fellow, first of all, most people don't know what they are. And the person was asking, can this be helpful for a job search, for job applications in the US? And I'm not that sure. What would you say?
Yeah.
I think that's an open question, and maybe it's planted the seed for me to sort of put my feelers out there and be aware in my conversations with other universities and employers, and then fellows themselves and alumni who can share their experience. I think that potentially for annual meetings for your organization and mine alike, this can be something we sort of try to explore in the long term. I don't have an immediate answer for that, but I think in briefly touching on, I think, points that both of you made at some point throughout the morning, a lot of this also comes down to network. So, black and white in and of itself, I couldn't put like a rating or a score on it. But in terms of the doors that get opened through the things like the alumni associations, and then your sort of counterparts and colleagues who also were awarded these fellowships or grants, I think you sort of, those open doors because you're aware of more opportunities. And even if a particular employer in this scenario that you're hoping to get a job through may not be highly aware or value it as much as it could be or should be, I like to think that sort of there's additional layers of benefit that come from that. But that's a very subjective opinion. So I won't give myself full credit for answering that question.
From the Marie Curie Alumni Association North America chapter, we try to work a lot on that. It's a form of doing some kind of science communication and science diplomacy. And but of course, we want to hear from fellows, from anybody who's relevant to the program, to try to advance this knowledge and this awareness. Because I always try to emphasize the fact that Marie Curie Fellows are not just European, they come from all over the world, from every possible continent, every country. So it's really international. It's not just Europeans coming to the US or Canada. And also they come from all possible disciplines. They can be somebody working at the NASA, somebody working on musicology or theater studies or nanotechnology. So it's really absolutely everything. And in terms of job searches, job applications, career development, I think there's still a very big difference between the opportunities of, we were talking about life and experimental sciences and humanities and social sciences. And today I wanted to give, thank you very much, Michael, for helping to do that. Also to give the perspective that in the field of social sciences, and in this particular case, international relations, foreign policy, and so on, there are opportunities, there are pathways, and nothing is ever lost, nothing is really frozen, and we can help and freeze it together. So I really hope this event helped you have the perspective that it might be slightly frozen, or I mean, not just institutionally partly frozen, but we can really help and freeze it together and make it move forward. I think this is a key message of all of us living through the pandemic. We have limitations, we have constraints, we have gone through very difficult situations, but it's all only through conversation, collaboration, dialogue that we can find a way out to build something new from scratch. Hopefully better. So it's a way of self-betterment, I think. And this is the good invitation about living this time together. So that would be the message. I don't know if Michael or Jackson, you want to add anything? You're very welcome before we close the event. So please.
Thanks for having me.
It was our pleasure. And we will have you again on March 18th, as
yes,
I was saying.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and it's a key and very timely topic. And as not just Europeans, but international fellows, we're looking forward to discovering how the United States is moving in this way of transatlantic relations from 2021 towards the future. So we're very interested about current developments, scenario design, and everything that you know a lot about, and also the colleagues will be talking about that. And I would also like to take this opportunity to announce the next event of our chapter, which is focused on some of the funding opportunities Jackson was talking about during his presentation, which is upskilling, going from Marie Curie to ERC, to the European Research Council funding opportunities. We'll have a professor who was awarded a ERC consolidated grant, Roberta D'Alessandro, talking from Utrecht University, and trying to give us advice on how to break the wall of moving from one program to another. So that would be on March 11th at 9 o'clock Eastern time, and 3 o'clock in Brussels time. And we look forward to welcoming you. Our events are free, open to everybody. We hope they're fruitful, useful, inspiring, and that they help bring some optimism to create a new world as we move along in cooperation. So thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.